In October 1987, architect Daniel Carter arrived at an abandoned mansion in Ashford, Vermont. The house had been empty for nearly 40 years, and locals believed it was cursed. Daniel didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in blueprints. But after comparing the original floor plan with the building itself, he discovered something impossible. The second-floor hallway was exactly 8 feet longer than it should have been. According to the official blueprint, that space simply didn't exist. Someone had hidden an entire room inside the walls of the house. The next morning, Daniel grabbed a hammer and walked toward the strange wall, unaware that opening it would change his life forever. Returned with 2 construction workers and carefully marked the wall where the hidden space should have been. As the first layer of bricks came down, a thick cloud of dust filled the hallway. Behind it stood an old iron door, covered in rust, as if it had been untouched for decades. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a single sentence carved into the metal. Some doors are sealed to protect what's outside. The workers laughed, assuming it was an old prank, but Daniel couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping over him. The air suddenly turned cold, and for a brief second, he thought he heard someone whisper from the other side of the door. He froze, then slowly placed his hand against the cold iron, pushed against the iron door. It opened with a deep metallic groan, as if no one had touched it in a lifetime. A narrow room appeared, covered in dust, yet strangely untouched by time. There was no furniture except a wooden table, an old tape recorder, and a small leather journal. The walls were completely bare, no windows, no second exit. One of the workers picked up the tape recorder and pressed the play button. Static filled the room for a few seconds. Then a man's voice quietly said, "If you're listening to this, you opened the door too early." The 3 men looked at each other in silence. Then the voice continued, "There were only supposed to be 2 of you." Daniel's heart began to race as he slowly counted everyone standing in the room. 1, 2, 3. A heavy silence filled the room. Daniel counted again. 3 people, exactly as he expected. The workers nervously laughed, insisting the recording had to be a coincidence. But before anyone could speak, the tape continued. "One of you doesn't belong here, and he isn't who you think he is." Daniel immediately looked at both workers. Their faces had turned pale. Suddenly, one of them whispered, "I didn't hear those footsteps." Daniel frowned. "What footsteps?" The worker pointed toward the dusty floor. There were fresh footprints leading deeper into the room, but none leading back out. Someone had walked inside recently, yet there was nowhere they could have disappeared. Daniel slowly followed the footprints until they stopped in front of the wooden table. Resting on it was the old leather journal covered with decades of dust. He carefully opened the first page. Every page was filled with handwritten names, followed by dates. Most of the dates were over 50 years old, but the final page looked different. The ink was still fresh. At the very bottom, one name had been written only hours earlier: Daniel Carter. His hands began to shake. He had never seen this journal before. He had never been inside this room. So who had written his name before he even opened the hidden door? Convinced someone was playing a cruel joke. "Who wrote my name?" he demanded. Neither worker answered. Instead, they kept staring at the tape recorder. It had turned on by itself. A crackling sound filled the room, followed by the same calm voice. "Daniel, don't let Michael leave the house." Daniel's blood ran cold. Michael was one of the workers, but Daniel had never said his name out loud since entering the room. He slowly turned toward him. Michael looked just as confused. "I swear, I've never been here before," he whispered. Then, without warning, the lights throughout the mansion went out, and the hidden room fell into complete darkness. Seconds later, the emergency flashlight flickered to life. The room looked the same, except Michael was gone. His flashlight lay on the dusty floor, still switched on, but there was no sign of him anywhere. There were no windows, no second door, and no place large enough to hide. Daniel and the remaining worker searched every corner in panic. Then Daniel noticed something that made his heart stop. The fresh footprints on the floor had changed. Instead of ending at the table, they now continued across the room and disappeared straight into the solid stone wall. As Daniel stepped closer, he heard 3 slow knocks coming from the other side of the wall. Cold stone, the 3 knocks. Daniel pressed his ear against the cold stone. The 3 knocks came again, slower this time. Then a faint voice whispered from inside the wall, "Don't trust the journal." Before he could react, another voice interrupted, "He's lying." Daniel stumbled backward. 2 different voices were speaking from the same place. The remaining worker grabbed a crowbar and struck the wall with all his strength. The stone cracked open, revealing a narrow passage that wasn't on the blueprint either. A freezing wind rushed out, carrying the smell of damp earth. At the end of the passage, a single light was glowing, and someone was standing perfectly still, facing away from them. Daniel called out, "Michael!" The figure didn't move. They slowly walked closer, their footsteps echoing through the narrow tunnel. Just a few feet away, the figure finally turned around. It wasn't Michael. It was an elderly man wearing clothes that looked at least 50 years old. His eyes were filled with fear. Without saying a word, he handed Daniel a faded photograph. In the picture stood 3 men in front of the same mansion, taken in 1952. Daniel stared at it in disbelief. One of the men in the photograph looked exactly like him. Not someone similar, exactly like him. Then the old man quietly said, "You came back, just like I warned you not to." Daniel's hands trembled as he stared at the photograph. It was impossible. The man standing in the 1952 picture had the same face, the same scar above his left eyebrow, even the same watch Daniel was wearing. "Who is he?" Daniel asked. The old man took a deep breath and replied, "That's not your grandfather, that's you." Daniel stepped back in disbelief. "That's impossible. I wasn't even born." The old man slowly shook his head. "Not yet." Before Daniel could ask another question, a loud crash echoed through the tunnel. The entrance behind them had collapsed, sealing them inside. The only way forward was deeper into the darkness. The old man led Daniel through the narrow passage until they reached a massive steel door covered with strange mechanical locks. Above it, faded letters read, "Observation Chamber." Daniel had never seen that name on any blueprint or property record. The old man placed his hand on the cold metal and whispered, "Everything started here." As the heavy door slowly opened, Daniel froze. Inside the chamber were dozens of old television screens, all showing different moments from his own life. His childhood, his graduation, even the morning he accepted the mansion project. Someone had been watching him, long before he ever found the hidden room. Daniel walked slowly toward the wall of flickering monitors. Every screen displayed a different moment from his life. One showed him on his first day of school. Another captured the day his father died. A third revealed him standing outside the Whitmore mansion just yesterday. None of these events had ever been recorded. There had been no cameras, no witnesses. Then one screen suddenly changed. It showed Daniel exactly where he was standing now. Only the timestamp read October 15th, 1987, 8:42 p.m. The clock on Daniel's watch showed 8:41 p.m. The old man whispered, "Don't look away." 1 second later, the screen showed Daniel collapsing to the floor. Before Daniel could react, every monitor went black. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the screens turned back on, but now they all showed the exact same image. Daniel was standing alone inside the hidden room, except there was someone behind him. He spun around instantly. No one was there. He looked back at the monitors. The shadow was still standing behind his image, perfectly still. Slowly, it raised one hand and pointed toward the leather journal. Daniel opened it again with shaking hands. This time, a new sentence had appeared on the final page. The moment you read this, the cycle begins again. Suddenly, the tape recorder clicked on by itself, and a familiar voice spoke just one sentence. "Welcome back, Daniel." Daniel's mind raced as the old man finally revealed the truth. "This house doesn't trap people," he said. "It traps time." Decades ago, a secret experiment was conducted beneath the mansion to observe whether a single moment could repeat forever. It failed, or so everyone believed. Since then, anyone who discovers the hidden room becomes part of the cycle. Every choice they make has already happened countless times. The journal wasn't predicting the future, it was recording every previous loop. Daniel looked at the final page again. Beneath his name were hundreds of identical signatures, each written by a different version of himself. Then he noticed one final line at the bottom. "Only one Daniel has ever escaped." Determined to break the cycle, Daniel grabbed the journal and threw it into the room's old furnace. Flames swallowed the pages within seconds. Every monitor instantly went dark. The hidden passage began collapsing, and the old man smiled for the first time. "You finally changed it," he whispered before disappearing into the dust. Moments later, rescue workers pulled Daniel from the ruined mansion. The hidden room was gone. There was no iron door, no tunnel, and no evidence that any of it had ever existed. Weeks later, Daniel returned home and found a small package waiting at his front door. Inside was a brand new leather journal. He slowly opened the first page, and his heart stopped. The handwriting was his own. On the last line it read, "See you again, October 14th, 1987.